Kai Tak Airport was so loud, so overwhelmingly noisy, that the sound itself became part of its identity. And buried within that story is a question that has quietly fascinated acoustic engineers and aviation historians for decades. What actually happened to sound inside the Kai Tak departure lounge? The airport served Hong Kong for 73 years, from 1925 until its closure on July 6, 1998. In that time, it became one of the most famous, most feared, and most deeply loved airports on Earth. Most people remember it for its terrifying landings and the jets screaming over rooftops, but far fewer people talk about what the terminal building itself did to sound. How the architecture of the departure lounge, designed by a London firm more accustomed to industrial buildings than airports, created acoustic conditions that no one intended and no one fully understood until the building was gone. To understand what happened inside the lounge, you first have to understand what was happening outside it. Kai Tak sat in the heart of Kowloon, pressed up against one of the most densely populated urban landscapes on the planet. The airport was only a street away from residential buildings in Kowloon City. An average of 36 flights per hour passed overhead, and during peak times that figure climbed to nearly 1 flight per minute. These weren't small aircraft gliding in at a comfortable altitude. Landing at Kai Tak meant executing a sharp right turn over densely populated Kowloon, often exiting that turn as low as 43 meters above the ground to line up with the single runway. Passengers called it the Kai Tak heart attack. Pilots called it the Hong Kong turn. The noise was staggering. Plane bellies and roaring engines overhead became the defining sensory experience of East Kowloon. Waiters in the local tea restaurants, the famous Cha Chan Tangs, would habitually pause mid-sentence when a plane passed, wait for the thunder to subside, and then carry on as if nothing had happened. Students in nearby classrooms instinctively looked up from their desks to watch aircraft glide across the sky above them. For aviation enthusiasts, that sound carried vitality, joy, and excitement. For residents, it was a nightmare. That was the sonic environment surrounding the Kai Tak terminal, a building that had to somehow function as a place of calm, of transition, of farewell, while being hammered by some of the most intense aviation noise in the world. And that brings us to the architects. In 1956, the Hong Kong government appointed the London-based firm Ramsay, Murray, White and Ward as consulting architects for a new terminal building. An unusual choice in some ways. The firm had built its reputation on industrial units, not transportation terminals. But the director overseeing the project, Keith Murray, was no ordinary architect. He was a decorated RAF pilot and one of the most influential designers of the Art Deco and modern age. Murray understood aviation. He understood the relationship between machines and the humans who operated them. And critically, he understood the industrial challenge of managing noise. Eric B. Kumain, a former Shanghai-based architect, prepared the working drawings. Eric would later design numerous prominent buildings across Hong Kong, including the Lisboa Hotel and Casino for Stanley Ho. But in 1956, his task was more fundamental: design a terminal building that could handle the specific demands of Kai Tak's impossible location. The terminal opened on November 2, 1962. Governor Sir Robert Black unveiled the commemorative plaque. The facility had cost 16 million Hong Kong dollars, roughly 1 million British pounds at the time, and it was a state-of-the-art facility for its era, with departing and arriving passengers split between 2 levels and an elevated roadway bringing passengers up to the departure level. That departure level is where things get acoustically interesting. The architects faced a problem that few terminal designers had ever confronted so directly. The building needed to absorb extraordinary external noise while maintaining the open, airy feel that passengers expected in a modern airport. Murray and his team drew on their industrial design background, using heavy concrete construction, specific ceiling geometries, and what appears to have been an intuitive understanding of how sound behaves in enclosed spaces. The departure lounge featured wide, low ceilings with particular geometries that were, by all evidence, designed primarily for structural and aesthetic purposes. But here's where intention and outcome diverge. The combination of ceiling height, surface materials, room proportions, and the placement of structural columns created acoustic conditions inside the departure lounge that were genuinely unusual. Sound did not behave the way you would expect it to in a space of that size and function. The lounge acted as what acoustic engineers would recognize as a partial sound trap, a space where certain frequencies were absorbed, redirected, or canceled in ways the architects almost certainly never planned. To understand what a sound trap is, think about it this way. In most large open rooms, sound radiates outward from its source, bounces off walls and ceilings, and creates a general wash of noise, a reverberant field where everything blends together. That's what you experience in most airport terminals, a kind of ambient roar where individual sounds lose their distinctness. But in certain architectural configurations, the geometry of a space can create pockets where sound behaves differently. Frequencies cancel each other out through destructive interference. Surfaces at specific angles redirect sound waves in unexpected ways. Hard materials placed next to soft ones create sharp acoustic boundaries. The result is a space that feels quieter than it should, or where sound seems to collect in some areas and simply vanish from others. This exact phenomenon has been documented in other famous transit hubs around the world. The most celebrated example is the Whispering Gallery at Grand Central Terminal in New York, where the vaulted ceilings designed by Rafael Guastavino allow a whisper at one corner of an archway to be heard clearly at the opposite corner, dozens of feet away. Architect Frank J. Pryl Jr., who worked on the terminal's 1990s restoration, described the effect as a happy coincidence, an acoustic property that was never a planned feature but what experts call a fortuitous byproduct of the overall architectural design. That kind of accidental acoustic engineering is more common than most people realize. When architects design for structural integrity and visual impact, they inadvertently create acoustic environments that can be startling in their effects. The Cathay Departure Lounge, designed by industrial architects solving an industrial problem, appears to have been one of those spaces. What made Catay's acoustic character particularly striking was the contrast. Outside the building, you had one of the loudest civilian environments on Earth. Nearly one aircraft per minute during peak hours at altitudes so low you could read the livery on the fuselage. And yet inside the departure lounge, travelers consistently described an experience that felt disconnected from that external chaos. The lounge had a quality of muted stillness that seemed disproportionate to the thin barrier of concrete and glass separating passengers from the runway. Some of that was certainly deliberate. The architects knew they needed sound insulation, but the degree of acoustic isolation and the particular quality of the quiet inside went beyond what standard insulation alone could explain. The geometry of the space was doing something additional, something unplanned. Consider what the departure lounge meant to the people who used it. One of the most enduring collective memories of Cathay is the ritual of farewell. Every time someone was bidding goodbye to relatives and friends, many would gather at the entrance of the departure hall to say their goodbyes and take photos. After a heartfelt wave, people would head up to the observation deck to watch their loved ones board their flights. This was an intensely emotional space. Families separating, loved ones leaving for distant countries, sometimes not knowing when or whether they would return. The acoustic quality of the departure lounge played directly into that emotional experience. The strange quietness of the space, the way external noise seemed to fall away, created what many remember as a feeling of being suspended between worlds. You were still in Hong Kong, still in Kowloon, but the roaring reality of Catay's runway felt like it belonged somewhere else entirely. This wasn't just poetic impression. The physics of the space genuinely created a transition zone where the sonic character of the outside world was not merely reduced, but transformed. The frequencies that made it through the building's envelope were altered by the internal geometry. Their character changed. The deep rumble of jet engines was attenuated differently than the higher frequency whine of turbines, and the result was an acoustic environment that felt fundamentally different from both the outside world and a typical quiet room. If you were traveling through Kai Tak in August 1970, you might have experienced an even more refined version of this phenomenon. That was when Cathay Pacific opened its first lounge, the Discovery Lounge. You would find a discreet door and ring the bell, and its musical chimes would welcome you into a comfortable carpeted room in soothing neutral colors, with a writing desk, glass-topped coffee tables, easy chairs, and a couch. The soft furnishings of that private space would have further altered the acoustic character, absorbing the residual frequencies that made it through the main lounge's accidental sound trap. The terminal went through multiple expansions over the decades. Stage 4 development completed in 1981, and Stage 5 followed in 1988, increasing the design capacity to 18 million passengers per year. But the airport's actual traffic far exceeded its planning. By 1996, Kai Tak was handling 29.5 million passengers annually, well over its intended capacity. The original departure lounge's acoustic qualities were likely diminished as the space was modified, expanded, and subdivided. More bodies meant more sound absorption, but also more sound generation, and the careful, accidental balance that Murray's original design had struck was gradually disrupted. Then, on the night of July 5, 1998, Cathay Pacific Flight CX-251 lifted off from Kai Tak Airport, and the golden era ended. The airport closed. The terminal fell silent for the first time in decades, and with its closure, the accidental acoustic environment of the departure lounge ceased to exist. What replaced it is, in its own way, a continuation of the story. The Kai Tak site has been transformed into Hong Kong's largest integrated sports and entertainment complex. At its center, the 50,000-seat Kai Tak Stadium, designed as the Pearl of the Orient, houses the world's largest acoustically sealed retractable roof. Where the acoustic properties of the old departure lounge were accidental and unplanned, the new stadium's acoustic engineering is deliberate, calculated, and precisely controlled. It's a direct inversion of the original story. The architects of the 1962 terminal stumbled into acoustic phenomena they never intended. The architects of the 2020 stadium engineered acoustic phenomena with surgical precision. Norwegian studio Snøhetta designed the airside skyscraper, which now sits above the Kai Tak MTR station that opened in 2020 beneath the site of the old passenger terminal. The station displays old plans and photos from the airport era. The grassy park spreading out from its entrances is dotted with mock departure boards and sculptures of suitcases, deliberate acts of memory, intentional tributes to what came before. But there is no tribute to the sound. No installation that recreates the peculiar acoustic quality of the old departure lounge. No recording, no simulation, no architectural echo of the space where thousands of families said their goodbyes in that strange, suspended quiet while jets roared just meters away. And perhaps that's fitting, because the most remarkable thing about the Kai Tak departure lounge's acoustic character was that it was never meant to exist in the first place. Keith Murray and his team at Ramsey, Murray, White, and Ward set out to build a functional terminal for a challenging location. They drew on their expertise in industrial architecture, solved structural problems, managed passenger flow, and created a building that served Hong Kong for 36 years. And somewhere in that process, through the specific combination of materials, geometries, and proportions they chose, they created an acoustic environment that transformed the experience of everyone who passed through it. They didn't know they were doing it. They couldn't have known. Acoustic modeling of the kind that would have predicted these effects didn't exist in the 1950s when the building was designed. It was, like the Whispering Gallery at Grand Central, a happy coincidence, an accidental phenomenon born from the intersection of engineering necessity and architectural intuition. Someone once said of Kai Tak, "There must be something on this airport worth preserving. We could make it a shrine to the old Kai Tak." In many ways, that's exactly what the redeveloped site has become. A shrine to the visible, photographable, documentable history of the airport. The runway markings, the approach lights, the departure boards. But the sound is gone. The accidental acoustic trap that made the departure lounge feel like a space between worlds, that gave families their last quiet moment together before separation, that existed for 36 years without anyone fully understanding why it worked. That sound is gone forever. You cannot preserve silence. You cannot put an acoustic phenomenon in a museum. You can only remember that it was there and wonder at the architects who created it without ever knowing what they had done. Kai Tak Airport operated for 73 years. Its terminal building stood for 36, and for every one of those 36 years, the departure lounge quietly performed a trick of physics that no one designed, no one planned for, and no one can ever recreate. It was an accident of architecture. And like all the best accidents, it turned out to be better than anything that could have been done on purpose.